Yes, this is our second annual Amber Live Halloween special, and we have a return guest from last year's, and that's local celebrity, author, and tour guide Thea Lewis. Tell us a story, Thea.
Amber, I want to thank you so much for having me tonight. It's wonderful being on your show, and combining it with Halloween makes it the most wonderful time of the year. I've been walking around the city of Burlington this year with all of my folks on the Queen City Ghost Walk tours, and everybody asks me, what's your favorite haunt? And telling someone what your favorite haunt is a little bit like telling someone what your favorite child is. It's very hard to do. But there's one place that people are enjoying, especially in downtown Burlington this year, and that is our stop at Vermont Pub and Brewery. Now, the Vermont Pub and Brewery was founded by a man named Greg Noonan. Sadly, he passed away, but he was the man responsible for people being able to have brew pubs in the state of Vermont. Now, it's a wonderful place to grab a beer or get a bite to eat, but I love it for its ghosts. It wasn't really on my radar at first when we were talking about haunted places in the city of Burlington, but little by little, young men would start approaching me at the end of my tours, and they would ask me why the Vermont Pub and Brewery wasn't on my tours. And I said, well, tell me more. I'm so intrigued. Well, story after story, I would hear things that were eerily similar from the young gentlemen who were going down to take a little break in the men's room in the basement of the Vermont Pub and Brewery. Now, a little bit of background. The Vermont Pub and Brewery is built on land that used to be owned by E.T. Englesby. You might recognize the name, Englesby Brook in Burlington. So these gentlemen would go downstairs and they'd be going about their business or just finishing up when something very peculiar would happen. Someone would come and stand next to them, a little too close for comfort. And when they would turn to address the situation of a lack of personal space, the gentleman would simply disappear. The way they described this apparition was he had hair tied back in kind of a rough ponytail. He was wearing a dark suit. And if they happened to have the presence of mind to look down, he was barefoot. Incredible. I had to talk to the folks who worked in that place to find out what was up. One of the people I talked to was a gentleman named Steve, who was a brewmaster there. He said he had encountered that same apparition downstairs in the Vermont Pub and Brewery. He said that he was headed down to use the men's room one day. And instead of going in, he paused for a moment because there was something strange happening to the door of the men's room. Someone was coming through it and headed into his brew room. He said he opened the brew room door and went inside and saw this gentleman standing on a drain in the middle of his brew room. He said, buddy, I don't know who you are or what you want, but you don't belong here. And at that point, the gentleman turned and walked right through one of the brew tanks and through the wall beyond. He said he'd also had the experience of being behind that tank, doing a repair. And in that space, big enough for just one person, he felt cold hands reaching out and touching his shoulders. So many stories from the Vermont Pub and Brewery. Two bartenders I talked with who, after hours, were just sitting, relaxing, decompressing from their evening. They each had a beer, and in the middle of them on the bar was an ashtray, which, while they were talking, began to spin and spin until it spun itself off the bar. I've heard another story about the Vermont Pub and Brewery that I love. Mike T., the kitchen manager, told me that important ingredients were often going missing in the kitchen and people were feeling a little spooked. And no one had ever really seen the ghost, but finally, someone who cleaned inside the Vermont Pub and Brewery did see the ghost. And when they asked him, oh my goodness, we've never seen this apparition and he's created so much havoc, what does it look like? And the person who was the morning cleaner said, well, he's hard to describe. Oh, no, wait. He looks a little bit like my brother Randy, who none of them had ever met, so not helpful. Sometime later, Mike T is working alone in the kitchen, and he was peeling potatoes at the sink, and a great big kettle that he needed came flying off a shelf across the room and hit the sink next to him. He hollered out, Randy, I don't need your crap this morning. Now, the Vermont Pub and Brewery is just one of my favorite places to grab a bite to eat or a drink. And some years back, My husband and I went to kind of dissect our ghost walk season. We love to pick a place in downtown Burlington every year to go and have a wonderful, relaxing bite to eat. So we went to the Vermont Pub and Brewery, and I ordered what I always order, bangers and mash. I love a good sausage and mashed potatoes and gravy. Well, what would I drink with this wonderful meal, I thought. Well, I looked at the beer menu, and on the beer menu that fall was a beautiful, just a delicious Bavarian ale called Beetlejuice. Well, Amber, you've seen me in my costume. Do I look like someone who would order a beer called Beetlejuice? Absolutely. I did, and it was delicious. So I called our server over, a lovely young man, a little cheeky, very funny, and I said, "Excuse me, could you bring me another Beetlejuice?" And he leaned over next to my shoulder, and he said, "Oh, love, I can let you order 2, but if you order 3, Michael Keaton comes to your table to bother you." Oh, Amber, I hope you have the happiest of Halloweens. I want to give you some tips if you should be going out for a little trick-or-treating later. If you should run into an evil or unfriendly spirit, well, it's a good idea to arm yourself with something that might fend them off. Some people say you can get rid of an unfriendly spirit by ringing a bell. And I have also read you can get rid of an evil or cantankerous spirit by throwing a key at it. I don't know if it works for ghosts, but it did work with an old boyfriend of mine. Happy Halloween.